At Dave Cooper Live, we connect the industry leaders in the architectural, engineering, and construction space with the people, the products, and the processes to help them build it better. All right. In the UK, most new homes are still built the traditional way, on site, brick by brick, which is great if you love mud, delays, and the occasional rainstorm slowing things down. But is this commitment to traditional actually blocking innovation? Today on Dave Cooper Live, we're joined by Ron Lang of AtkinsRéalis to dig into whether offsite construction production strategies are unintentionally standing in the way of offsite construction and perhaps keeping the housing crisis alive. But before we get into any or all of this, we got to give a big shout out to Cobalt Creed. They service developers, builders, prefab home builders, and manufacturers, allowing them to achieve the highest levels of comfort, indoor air quality, and low energy costs with their HVAC systems installed for their projects and their customers. Their approach is simple. By using their proprietary small duct, high-velocity central heating and cooling system. You want to learn more about them, go to their website, cobaltcreed.com. And now a few words from these supporting members as well. CombiLift is the largest global manufacturer of multi-directional forklifts and straddle carriers, a leader in long load handling solutions, offering a free warehouse and site optimization design service. CombiLift helps companies of all sizes and from every industry maximize the capacity, safety, and efficiency of their warehouse and storage facilities. A big thank you to Paul Short and the team at CombiLift for helping us all to build it better. Visit them at combilift.com. Forward Solutions Group is successfully driving companies to succeed where others have failed. Are you looking to start a factory, optimize your existing factory, streamline your production, or take your team to the next level? Whatever your needs are, Forward has a solution for you. Reach out to Ben at forwardsolutionsgroup.com. All right, a big thank you to all of our supporting members, and to include all the supporting members you see going across the ticker below on this screen, which you will see several times throughout the show. We can't do any or all of this without all of you out there supporting us. And last but not least, Greenbuild is coming up November 4th through the 7th. And yours truly, we have a stage, a 20 by 40 stage in the middle of the showroom floor. And we have discounts for you. 20% off. That's right. Use the QR code you see right on the screen right there. We want to see you at Greenbuild. We are bringing the offsite community together. I don't care if you're in modular, panelized, mass timber, concrete. This is a show you're not going to want to miss. And guess what? We're taking it on the road. So you better get used to seeing us out there, because we're going to build something bigger, badder, and better, so we can have a singular voice in this industry. All right, without further ado, let's bring Ron onto the show. Ron, how are you, sir?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you, Dave. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. Thanks for bringing yourself and the English or UK accent, whatever you want to prefer to it as. But hey, Ron, you've been in this industry a long time. You're working a policy at the very highest levels at the UK government. But before we get into all of that, we want to know everything about you from the moment you were born, this moment in time. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital, or I'm going to have a family member on, and they're going to, one, go into your studio and see your Matchbox collection, and two, they're going to tell us all the dirt. But you only have a minute and a half to do it. Let's hear who you are.
No worries, Dave. Thank you. I'll try and give you all the detail I can. I'm not as old as I look, I should add. So yes, I've been in this industry for a long time, but perhaps not as long as my hairline suggests. So I am from Leicester in the UK, right in the middle of England. I was born here. I've lived here for pretty much all of my life, and I work across quite a lot of bits of the UK, mainly in London. Interestingly, I fell into this industry really. I always wanted to be involved in automotive engineering. So my whole room is covered in cars you can't see. I'm obsessed with cars and automotive technology. But actually, as I started to go through university education, it was very clear that the UK car industry really wasn't what it used to be, and that very difficult to kind of find a job in that sector. So had a kind of heart to heart with my dad at the time, and he just moved over. He's an engineer by background. He just moved over from engineering into construction, and thought it'd be a great idea if maybe I came with him. I think he's now retired a year or so ago, but I think he quickly also realized perhaps that was a more complex move than he expected. So I studied architectural engineering at university with design management. So really logical progression for me would have been to go into working for a contractor as a design manager. But actually what had happened was through my later school years and all the way through university, I'd already been working as an architectural technologist anyway, within a local practice. So by the time I left university, I already had a good few years experience in the sector, and then left university to enter that kind of design space once more. I think what's telling about my career is that I only really spent a few years after university working in that role, because I was immediately frustrated by the way the sector works, by the methods we use, the fact that, as a designer, I sat there effectively redesigning things that really didn't need to be redesigned using fairly archaic methods. And this is before kind of, BIM properly hit and kind of digital technology. So we really were, brick DIMs on the table, brick DIM charts, on the table, and trying to design people's houses using, scale rules and brick DIM charts. So very disillusioned by what I'd entered as a sector. And bear in mind my fascination with the auto sector, you could see that gap that we talk about all the time immediately. So I have spent probably certainly the last 15 years of my career working in transformation, sector transformation. So I'm interested in anything that's about innovation, that's about improving the outcomes that we get from construction activities. And of course, one of the common themes or consistent themes around transformation over that entire time, and way before me, decades before me, is this desire to become more industrialized as a sector. So I found myself to some extent specializing in that space. I work in lots of other spaces too, but I get involved in lots of conversations that seem to start with, why can't we do this? What's gone wrong? Why is it so difficult? Which brings us to this conversation today, Dave. So hopefully that was enough detail for you.
Yeah. Man, I wish everybody could be so precise on, where they came from and how they got there. But an architectural technologist, is that what you said?
Yeah. So you have architects, you have architectural technicians, and then you have architectural technologists. So you tend to be the engineer of architecture. So this is very much, I used to inherit concept designs that really hadn't been designed in any way you could ever build, to try and convert them into something buildable, and then fight with the planners about whether what you'd actually ended up with in any way matched the vision that the architect had in the first place. So quite an interesting role.
Tell me about AtkinsRéalis and, kind of what your role is there, and, because that's only one portion of what you do, it sounds like.
Yeah, so I've been with AtkinsRéalis for about 4.5 years now. So prior to joining AtkinsRéalis, I was the Chief Technical Officer of something called the Construction Innovation Hub in the UK. And I'll briefly talk about that, Dave, because it kind of sets up where I've come from. But the Construction Innovation Hub was a government-funded program. It was a 4-year, turned out to be a nearly 5-year program, sponsored by government, with the very, very clear aim of transforming construction. Now, given that challenge, there's quite a lot to go at, right? But one of the main themes of that transforming construction challenge was around industrialization, was around kind of platform-based approaches to, particularly around kind of social infrastructure, government projects. So I left that research program, that innovation program, when it came to an end, joined AtkinsRéalis. Now, Atkins used to be called Atkins, is now called AtkinsRéalis after some reorg and some mergers. Atkins have been around for decades, really long-standing, excellent reputation as engineering consultants, and working everything from nuclear to housing, as we're going to talk about today. I work in the client advisory side of that business. So for my sins, I'm now a chartered management consultant, although we don't say that very often because they get a bad rap. But I work with our sort of big portfolio clients, whether that be government clients or whether that be big private clients, to try and look at the way they deliver and transform their delivery model. So Atkins covers a huge amount. AtkinsRéalis, sorry, covers a huge amount of ground. And what's really interesting about my job is I get to get involved in the really, early stages. So projects like NEOM, the line, which you'll have heard of,
Yep.
I was involved in that very, very early doors to try and help them to understand what an industrialized approach to the line might look like.
And I mean, that's a huge project with some huge deadlines right now, because if I'm correct, don't they have the 2030 Olympics or something coming out that way on the line?
Something like that, yeah. So again, we're as an organization still involved. I'm not involved in that project anymore, but it's a great example of the need to deliver differently. They don't have the number of skilled workers, they don't have the access to materials, they don't have the time that they need to build that unless they industrialize it. So I won't talk in too much detail about that project because there's a whole kind of different conversation, but certainly a good example.
So your research suggests home builders' production strategies, offsite construction, are a barrier to offsite construction. What is the barrier? What are the main sticking points that you're seeing out there?
Yes, it's interesting that the housing industry, of all the sectors that we're trying to industrialize, and they're all at different stages of maturity on that, housing is always the difficult one, the idiosyncratic one, if you like. And what you're referring to in terms of research takes us back probably 10 plus years, when the research question that was posed to me was, why can't house builders in the UK adopt offsite construction methods? And it's really interesting because in your intro you talk about the kind of obsession with traditional and brick and all of those things, and there is an element of that, but actually it's far more fundamental than that. The issue with the housing market in the UK, and I suspect with many other places across the globe, is the fact that we rely on the private sector, for-profit private developers, to deliver housing. Therefore, they only deliver housing at the rate in which makes sense to make the most profit. So certainly in the UK, we're very land restricted, I guess. So much smaller market, smaller island than you guys are used to. So what you tend to find is that house builders could build much, much more quickly, but actually it doesn't make any sense, because all that happens is you bid very high prices for the land. You want it to appreciate over time, and you also don't want to flood the market. If you go to a house building show site in the UK, you'll only ever see 1 or 2 houses complete or nearly complete. And of course, that creates this feeling that you need to get one before they're gone. If you turned up and there were 50 houses ready to go, then suddenly maybe you'll take a little bit longer, and you'll maybe take your choice a little bit more seriously. So there is that. And I don't think this is, I've been on a journey over the last 10 years from really having a problem with that, and really kind of having some beef, I guess, with the house builders, to understanding that that's the way they operate. That's the market we've created. Since the 70s, we don't deliver huge amounts of public sector housing, so we rely on that private sector, and that private sector relies on profit. So, we are where we are,
Right.
but it makes no sense. The research that we did said, it tried to understand the current model, and they need flexibility, and they need flexibility in different ways. They need flexibility to slow and speed the site depending on demand. They need flexibility to build different bits at different times. So perhaps all the 3 beds go, crazy, and everyone buys them, and they need to build some more of them. When they were actually planning to build the 5 beds over there, they need flexibility in their production in terms of what they build and the rate they build at. Now, if you've ordered 50 houses to come from a manufacturer and they all turn up exactly as planned, which is probably what we'd expect, that's not really good for the business model. So there is a fundamental issue. The point you make around tradition and the way that our houses look, and what we call local vernacular in the UK, and needing to look like things were built in the past, I think is a factor, but is nowhere near as big a factor as that.
So it wouldn't you say though, supply and demand, and with the housing crisis, the demand side is actually really good for the bigger private sector developers out there to constantly have a demand. So is the crisis is something that these bigger players really want to fix?
That's a good question. I think
Oh, did you freeze up, Ron?
I'm still
Uh-oh.
here. I'm still
May
here.
have lost him there, folks. Give us a minute and we'll bring him back. There you are. You back in, Ron?
I'm still here and chatting away. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a circular conversation, is it? Because if these developers pay for these sites many years in advance of building them out and rely, like I say, on that appreciation over time. Now, if they hadn't bid so much for the land in the first place and could afford to turn over that site more quickly, then you wouldn't be so worried about having to kind of slow the production down. So all these things are very linked. We do have a massive housing crisis in the UK, as many countries across the world. But the measures that we seem to take to try and address that often tend to stoke demand and make it easier to spend more money or borrow more money to buy houses that get ever increasingly more expensive, rather than trying to sort out the kind of supply side issues. So unless you're going to start to address the whole market, and of course, if we suddenly flood the market with the hundreds of thousands of houses we need, what happens to house prices? House prices start to drop. So this is a very complex issue to fix. One thing I did want to mention, though, Dave, as well, is we give the house builders a bad rap for not kind of adopting industrialized methods. They are, where it makes sense, they are adopting industrialized methods. Many of them are investing in their own factory production and have done on and off for years. So where they are building out and they need the speed, where there are elements of the build that they need speed or they need quality from, they will be using offsite methods, but it's not a fully kind of industrialized model yet.
Well, I mean, and because of the size and territories that they cover, especially here in the United States, right? I mean, there's a whole lot of different codes in different sectors of the United States. There's different weather patterns, right? So the environment and climate zones play a big role in that. Unions play a big role in that. But you're right. I mean, a lot of the big builders have adopted panelized construction, just open wall, panelized truss wall systems. But we are starting to see more interest in a bigger push and more conversations coming from the larger developers out there to really want to understand, this methodology of building, because they're struggling with the labor force like the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But even more so now with the policies in place here in the United States, which is all over the news, right? A lot of that labor force is no longer here or going to be here. So we have to shift, we have to change, or we're not going to get anything built.
Yeah, and what we see in the UK, and again, it's probably no different to anywhere else, but whenever there's a bit of a slowdown or a bit of a turn down or a pandemic, as we're used to now, those people don't come back. So we lose huge swathes of our labour. It doesn't come back again. It goes to other sectors. So we have a natural wastage in terms of the aging workforce. They are getting old. The average age is getting older, but we're also not attracting new people in. And I think it's shows like this and other things to try and make the industry a little bit more attractive for people. But skills is a huge issue. We can't build even the number that we're building now really with the skills we've got while we're seeing quality kind of drop. So it is at the center of the problem.
What do you think the biggest hurdle for offsite adoption, or builders that want to use offsite adoption? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, just a few moments ago. But if there was one hurdle that a builder was looking at, a developer that wanted to start incorporating more offsite construction, or an offsite construction person trying to get in with more developers, right? What is the number one hurdle you see out there?
Yeah, so maybe I can answer those two sides. So I think and there are many. So you've alluded to the fact there are many barriers, but the ones that come up a lot of the time in terms of developers is just kind of having some clarity over things like insurance and mortgages and those kind of things. We still see these things as different, as innovative, as new, even though definitely not new across the board on most of this stuff. So they would see difficulties with getting these products insured, getting warranties, getting mortgage companies to kind of accept them as being a big barrier. On the supply side, it's more simple than that. From an industrialization perspective, you need continuity, you need stability of pipeline and demand, and we simply don't get that. We get fits and starts of, and that might be, as I've said, because they're trying to kind of control the pace of build, but it also might be because of things like planning. So the UK government's doing a lot of work at the moment around changing some of our planning regulation and the way that it's structured and the way it's carried out. So if we can stop sites being stopped because they're having to go through extra kind of loopholes to get permission to start, we can give a little bit more certainty to those suppliers. Whereas at the moment, not only are we asking them to build pretty much different things all the time, which is a problem, we maybe get onto that a little bit later. We're not designing with the systems. We're sort of dictating to the systems what they need to do. But we're also then not giving them any kind of volume aggregated demand with any kind of certain pipeline. So these are all things that we're certainly beginning to try and tackle in the UK through some of the legislation.
Yeah. Legislation. That's where I wanted to go. Policymakers, right? The people sitting in the round room. Do they still wear the big white wigs over there? I don't know.
Of course. Oh, yeah. That's part of a job.
Yeah, but you've started something called the Construction Leadership Council, right? Or you're part of that anyhow. And you said it's an industry body that talks directly to the government. Hopefully I got that right. Tell us a little bit about what the Construction Leadership Council does and how does it play a role with policymakers?
Yeah, so definitely can't claim to have started it. I've been involved with the Construction Leadership Council for quite some time, but it was established exactly as that it's co-chaired by someone from government and someone from industry as the kind of the top chairs of this thing. And then the idea is that it's there to challenge policy, and policy is there to challenge it, so that it has a kind of single voice to talk to the industry through. Now it's very challenging. Every construction sector in any part of the world has a huge kind of tail of SMEs and small businesses in construction. But what the Construction Leadership Council needs to do is to try and represent voices all the way down to those small businesses, all the way up to the large kind of multinationals. So it's good that when you've got clear policy, and again, we can come back to whether we've got kind of clear policy environment, but when you've got clear policy, you've got an organization there that can then try and feed that into the industry and help and support that policy to grow. It can also help to develop the policy in the first place. So lots of my involvement with CLC and around the CLC has been trying to help government to develop effective policy, which is not easy.
I couldn't imagine it's easy. I mean, I just see what happens on our house floor here in the States, and the different opinions that people have. How do people get involved with what you're doing? Like, right. So when we talk about the Construction Leadership Council and say I'm an offsite or manufacturer, a modular panel, whatever the case is, can I get involved with the Construction Leadership Council and have a say on how policy is written?
I guess so, yeah. So there are many kind of ways to get involved. I guess the Construction Leadership Council is made up of many kind of work streams tackling different topics. Some of those are kind of very time bound. So, the issues we've had around, fire issues post the Grenfell disaster in the UK, you end up with kind of big committees set up to try and address some of those issues. Some things are longer term. So I chair a group called the Industrialized Construction Working Group, as you might imagine. And we actually picked that group up off the back of government's intention to mandate platform approaches. Now, having been one of the authors of the platform rulebook that we brought out through that Construction Innovation Hub program I mentioned, what we said was, okay, that's great that you've shown some intention, you've kind of jumped on this thing, but actually let us help you to understand what that really means, because often there's a tendency to jump into terms and buzzwords or things that have been written without really understanding the implications of it. So you can get involved. We're doing loads of work in that group at the moment. If you go to the Construction Leadership Council website and you type in industrialized construction, we've been trying to really define what industrialized construction actually is. We have a policy environment that's built around modern methods of construction, as have been called for some time. And most of my work over the last few years has been trying to move the policy narrative from thinking about the systems. We're obsessed with the shiny systems and the robots and the Cat 1 and the Cat 2 systems, but we've spent nowhere near enough time thinking about the delivery model that we need to be able to enable those systems. So where policy starts to say, you should adopt these systems, we aren't necessarily creating those conditions I'm talking about. So we aren't stabilizing demand. We aren't rationalizing our requirements and trying to stop building bespoke prototypes all the time. If you can't control any of that stuff, you can point at these systems as much as you want. But what we've had are, many, many, many examples of trying to shoehorn these industrialized methods and processes into otherwise very traditional environments. And the two things don't, often, the majority of the time, don't work together. You end up not getting any of the benefits that you thought you would because you haven't actually designed around a kind of manufacturing and assembly approach.
All right. So what's the answer, Ron?
So I think we're getting there. We are seeing some green shoots. So if I reference some of the things that government clients have been doing, so our Ministry of Justice in terms of its prison program, building new prisons, has started to look at trying to develop standard kind of designs and kits of parts, trying to have long-term relationships with a kind of consortium of builders, giving them the certainty that they will all be building something, and then asking them to apply these standard systems. So we're starting to see good work there. We've got a new hospital program in the UK. We're woefully behind building all social infrastructure actually, but certainly in terms of healthcare. So again, there's a whole program around how we don't build one-off bespoke multi-billion-pound hospitals every time, but actually start to move towards more kind of standardized systems and designs. And then the Department for Education in terms of schools, have for quite some time had much better idea of trying to rationalize their. They know what a good school looks like. They know what good classrooms look like. They can standardize. You can have range. You can have choice, but we don't need these very, very bespoke school buildings everywhere. You can put some bespoke touches on them, but right now, in terms of the backlog that we have in all of these buildings and facilities, we have to stop building prototypes effectively. So I think we're seeing some good signs. If anyone's interested in the policy side, we're going back a few years now, but there's something called the Construction Playbook that the UK developed. It's very much about how we want clients to operate, how we want clients to act on the government side. And then there was something called the Transforming Infrastructure Performance roadmap and program. And again, that started to set out moving towards this kind of platform-based approach to things. So lots of the key thinking has been done. And we're seeing some good examples of it being applied. It's just not necessarily being applied consistently.
Yeah, for sure. And for those watching, we've actually discussed both of those programs on the show over the years. So I'm sure if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll be able to search that up and find a more in-depth conversation on it. Jennifer had a good question, though. She said, what is the current definition of industrialized construction? Have you landed on one? Big question.
Well, probably yours has got a Z in it, Dave, but I'll let you off for the Z. That's fine. You can have your Z and yours. So the quick answer is we've come to a definition, but the definition is supposed to be challenged, and so that's why I encourage people to go and have a look at that. Find it on the CLC website. We're trying to focus on the fact that the basic premise of what's been trying to do through MMC, offsite, industrialized, whichever language you want to use, the premise has always been the same. We have to move a bigger proportion of construction process into manufacturing type environments and stop relying on site-based variable processes. So the premise hasn't really changed. And we have a good diagram that tries to explain that this isn't a binary thing. You're not either traditional or industrialized. We're trying to increase the proportion to which you are industrialized, and that will look different for different sectors. So we have a definition document. I think it's already on revision 5 or something in the last kind of year or so. We use that. We take, when I go and do presentations, I use bits of it. I ask people for feedback, and I want to keep developing that. So encourage people to do that. What it also does is tries to contextualize those other terms. So we talk about industrialized construction as being the application of manufacturing processes and technology into construction. But things like design for manufacturing assembly often are used as if they're describing the methods. Design for manufacturing assembly is very simple. That if you want to design something that can be built in factories, you have to design that way. You can't design traditionally and then expect it to work in a factory. So things like the FMA, things like modular. I have a B in my bonnet about everyone using the term modular to mean volumetric. Modular is anything where you break it into modular parts. So I do a lot of work with people on modularization strategy. What's the best way to break this thing down into bits? And for this product, and we can get onto the word product maybe in a moment, a house, the way you break a house down into bits is very different to the way you would break a bridge down or a prison or whatever. So modularization is another key concept. So go and have a look at that definition document. It isn't finished, to answer Jennifer's question, but it's evolving and it's helping us have a much richer understanding of what industrialization is. It isn't just about systems.
Love it. Love it. So the manufacturers that are out there that, are struggling, how can they better align, whether it's modular, panelized, whatever the system is that they've, kind of adopted for their manufacturing process? What would you suggest they do to better align themselves with the large scale home builders and developers out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. We see some kind of common pitfalls, I guess, with some of the failures that we've had, certainly in the UK. So most of the failures have been in house building, and most of the failures have been in kind of Cat 1 volumetric systems, because that's the most extreme end, I guess, of industrialization, not because the systems don't work. But some of the common issues are that we have a sector built on suppliers with proprietary systems. So from a client's perspective, having to commit to a proprietary system that may not be operating in a few years' time, just based on the experience we've had, is a very risky thing to do. What a client wants to do and what his design team wants to do is to design around fairly standard systems where you've got the option of having multiple people that could make that thing. So this is kind of where the platform stuff started to go. Could we have kind of common open source platforms that many manufacturers could produce, which would give the client some confidence to invest in that platform without necessarily investing in the specific supplier. So there's definitely some work for suppliers to do better collaboration. There is an issue around IP, or perceived IP or USP, that suppliers often think they've got something very special, where when you put these things side by side, they're not really competing on those minor details. They're competing on their service delivery, their production facilities, whatever it is. So we need to try and get over this myth that everybody has some very special, unique product that nobody else can make, because I think that, again, makes it very hard for a developer or a client to kind of build some trust in that. Now, once things get going and you start to have these big organizations or these big manufacturers making thousands of these things, like we see in Japan, for example, then that issue kind of starts to go away. But right now we need to build some trust.
Yeah, we do need to build some trust. And I know you mentioned the word product a few moments ago, right? But with a platform-based approach, how important is productization when it comes to the manufacturing assembly line? And do you see AI or technology allowing manufacturers to do more bespoke products on the fly because the technology is moving so fast that allows them to make those changes that does not slow up production line capabilities?
Yeah, it's a really good challenge, Dave. So I'll take the first part. So why do I talk about product? And you're right. When we were doing all this work around platforms and product platforms more specifically, the only way you can make sense of any of this stuff is to think about the built asset as a product, because things like I talked about modularization and DFMA, etc. Unless you visualize this end product as this end thing, as a product, then it's very difficult to make the language make any kind of sense. And in construction, when we talk about the product, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the plasterboard or the studs or whatever it is. So trying to get clients and consumers, I guess, when we think about housing, to think about these things as products means we start to have a different mindset. We don't expect endless customization when we buy a car or a watch or whatever it is. A mobile phone is a great example. We expect to be able to customize to some extent, but we don't expect to have exactly what it is that we want. That's the product offering that we have. So I think the language around product is really helpful. But you're quite right. So I've been challenged on this quite a few times recently. So I say, the extreme end, manufacturers want to just make the same thing over and over again. Their production environment needs to be set up just to make that thing and everything's perfect. I think you're quite right. As we go towards more automated processes, more digitally enabled automated processes, I think the ability to customize things definitely becomes much easier, but always within some limits, right? And one of the reasons for that is that if we want to start to have easier and quicker ways of verifying, validating performance, for example, or warranty or whatever else, if we're endlessly changing the products and the systems, that environment becomes very, very difficult. So perhaps the truth is somewhere in the middle. But effectively, if we think about these things as products, we think about the extent to which those products can be industrialized and how much variation across the product family we can realistically achieve. Again, always language starts to make some sense. Then we can think about how variable the production process can be and how much of that customization it can accommodate.
Ron, you're on the front lines, with the manufacturers, the developers, and the policymakers. If we're looking ahead, do you believe that offsite construction could be more than just a niche and move, into more of a mainstream role, whether it's panelized, modular, whatever the case is?
Yeah, I think for certain sectors, housing being the classic example, we don't have that choice. The trajectory we're on, for all the reasons you've mentioned, we don't have the people to build this stuff, and that will only get worse. The housing backlog is getting bigger and bigger. That's not going to address itself. So I don't think we have a choice, but it requires policymakers to be much braver than they have been in the past. So the UK is committed to, and this number won't sound big to you guys over there, but we're committed to building this 1.5 million homes. That is not going to come without some level of industrialization. It's just not possible. We don't have the skills to be able to deliver that. However, that only matters if somebody, some people, some industry, not quite sure who, is going to be held to account for that number. And we all know the kind of joys of politics. You throw a number out of there 4 years, 5 years later, whatever it is, that number's not been hit and everyone kind of just disappears back into the shadows again. So unless that's a real firm commitment, unless they start to batch up and aggregate bits of demand, big chunks of demand, and present them to the market in a way that can be delivered in an industrialized way, not piecemeal, giving little bits and pieces to the market, then we will start to see that change. Those examples I gave, when we start to batch up prisons or hospitals or whatever it is and start to say to the sector, hey, if we give you 10 of these or 100 of these, how would you do it now? And the only logical answer is going to be to do it in a much more industrialized way. Ask them to make one at a time. No one's investing in a factory for that. So these are all really basic. I'm oversimplifying things, but we need the policymakers to stick to the targets. One of the things that we also need to do is stick to outcome-based targets. So if we want to reduce carbon, if we want to increase productivity, if we want to reduce waste, all of those things can only be achieved with a more industrialized approach. So why not set targets and stick to targets on those things? Let's not target the offsite methods. Let's target the outcomes that we want. And by default, you'll get offsite methods anyway.
Why do policymakers skeptical or unwilling to stick to a plan, or have some the guts to do it? What is holding him back? Is it failure? Is it not getting reelected? I mean, I know that's some of it, but really from your perspective, if you were to walk up to somebody that was always throwing a roadblock, what would you tell them? What would you tell them to do?
I think if I could answer that question, Dave, I'd be very rich. What stops them sticking to that? It is very difficult, in any kind of democracy, when you've only got short political cycles, to try and achieve some of these changes and to get the kind of wins they need within their term is very, very tricky. So you end up trying to go for the short and the quick wins and the quick news stories. If we had longer term, so we've just published a 10-year infrastructure strategy in the UK, which tries to say, if given 10 years, this is all the stuff we want to build over 10 years. You give the market sight of that 10-year pipeline, and suddenly it all starts to look very attractive. You start to get investment. But of course, the answer we get back, and I'm only really reinforcing your question here, Dave, the answer you get back is, yeah, but we've seen this before. In 4 years' time, we'll have a kind of a new thing, and it'll be a new target. So we can't kind of underplay the role that a kind of political cycle plays in the ambition to do things that take a little bit longer.
What haven't we talked about, Ron, that you want to make sure people understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, how they get involved with you? Is there anything we missed in this conversation? I'm sure there's a lot we missed, but without going too deep into the weeds, is there anything out there that you want to make sure people know?
No, I don't think so. I think, like I said, I really love people to kind of get involved in the debate around the kind of definition of the language. It's dry, it's boring. Some people hate it. Some people think it's semantics. But it's very, very true that if people are sitting around a table using different words to describe the same thing, or using the same words to describe different things, it's very difficult to make clear policy. It's very difficult to make kind of joint progress. So go find that definition document. Let's kind of get some critical feedback on it. Please stop using the words modern methods of construction. They're not modern, and the methods are one thing, but the delivery model is much more important.
Was that modern enough? Methods of construction, offsite construction, industrialized construction. There is a part of me, and I'm just going to say, Ron, with modern method. With the modern methods of construction language, that's the only one that probably could appeal most to the consumer. Industrialized does not sound like Apple computers.
So you're quite right. So we have pushback around industrialization, thinking about very dark, very brutal architecture. Certainly looking
not
back
green,
in the UK,
not sustainable.
Not green, looking back to post-war housing, which was temporary. So there is all of that. Also, though, the word modern strikes fear into the UK buyer, because we're worried about, well, it's different, it's modern, will it last? Will my mortgage provider give me a mortgage? So you do have to be careful with what you use. I'm less bothered about the words, I'm more bothered about the narrative. And as I say, if we only ever focus on pushing the solutions, the systems into projects, and we don't change the project, then we're on a hide into nowhere.
Yeah, that is for sure. Ron, man, we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. I know you're busy over there. And again, if you could take, and maybe in the comments on LinkedIn or YouTube, why don't you put a link to that document that you keep mentioning? That way people can find it real quick. So you can just look for that in the link. Ron, just stay right there. I'll come right back to you in just a moment. For the rest of you out there, I know it's covering my pretty face, but Green Build, man. 20% off. Use discount code DC Live. We are going to be in Los Angeles at the convention center. And let me tell you something. The mayor's coming. The policymakers are coming. There's going to be ADUs and modulars in the parking lot because they need to rebuild. And finally, they are at a point where that can start happening at scale. So I'm told. We'll see how that plays out. But we're not going to get anywhere unless we get out there and show them how we can build better. And regardless of what Ron said, modern methods of construction, industrialized construction, offsite construction, it's the only way forward right now. And we have a 20 by 40 stage out there. So be sure to come on out. And if you want to support us, you want to be on that stage, you want to be a speaker, we're looking for the greatest minds out there to talk to all these policymakers on how we're going to rebuild LA. So with that said, hit that discount code when you go to Greenbuild and sign up. All right, Ron, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. This has been a blast. I really do appreciate you being here. And, you know, we can all learn a lot from each other around the world. We have the same problems. Everybody does.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. For the rest of you out there, it's Monday. That's right. You still got 4.5 days to keep building it better. So as soon as I'm done with my outro, you can get back to your busy workload, and I'm going to do the same. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching. What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you. And as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching.